My name is Rose Tyler, and at 60 years old, I learned that my son had been counting the days until my death. The realization came on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in late spring, as we sat in my conservatory overlooking the gardens I'd tended for 25 years. The wisteria was in full bloom, purple cascades draping the pergola like nature's own curtains, and the air was sweet with the scent of jasmine and roses. I'd prepared lunch myself, despite the fatigue that had become my constant companion since the diagnosis. Lobster salad with fresh herbs, cucumber sandwiches cut into perfect triangles, and strawberries from my own garden, served with clotted cream. The bone china gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, and I'd arranged white peonies from the cutting garden in crystal vases throughout the room. Everything was perfect, just as I'd always made it for my son. Daniel sat across from me, 34 years old and still impossibly handsome in the way that had always made people, especially women, forgive his selfishness too easily. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit fit like it had been made for him, which it had. The Rolex on his wrist caught the light as he reached for his wine glass, a vintage Sancerre that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. "Mum, you really didn't need to go to all this trouble," he said, though he was already on his second serving of lobster salad. "You should be conserving your energy." Conserving your energy. The phrase he'd been using since my diagnosis 6 months ago, always with that tone of false concern that barely masked his impatience. "I enjoy cooking for you, darling. It makes me feel useful." "About that," Daniel said, setting down his fork and leaning forward with the expression he'd worn as a child when he wanted something expensive. "I've been thinking about your situation." My situation. As if terminal breast cancer were a social inconvenience rather than a death sentence. "What about it?" "Well, you're obviously not going to be able to manage your affairs much longer. The treatments, the medications, the whole process. It's going to be overwhelming." I sipped my wine and waited. 25 years of single motherhood had taught me to recognize the setup for one of Daniel's requests. "I've been talking to some financial advisors," he continued, "and they all agree that it would be much more efficient if we simplified your estate situation now while you're still capable of making decisions." Still capable. Another phrase that had become his favorite since the diagnosis. What kind of simplification? Daniel's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm he usually reserved for expensive toys. "Transfer everything into my name now. The house, the investments, the $2.5 million in savings. That way, when the time comes, there won't be any complicated probate issues or tax complications. When the time comes." He couldn't even bring himself to say, "when you die." "That's very thoughtful of you to worry about tax complications," I said carefully. "It's the smart thing to do, Mum. And honestly," he leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting to something that looked almost like pity. "You don't have much time left anyway. The cancer will get you soon enough. Why not make sure your money is put to good use while you're still here to see it?" The words hit me like a physical blow, not the acknowledgement of my mortality. I'd made peace with that months ago. But the casual cruelty of it, the assumption that my impending death was simply a logistical problem to be managed efficiently. Put to good use how? I managed. Well, I've got that mortgage on the London flat that's killing me. $2 million would pay that off completely. And there's this Aston Martin I've been looking at, nothing too flashy, just a DB11. About $150,000, which is practically nothing when you consider the investment value. An Aston Martin. He wanted to use my death money to buy a car that cost more than most people earned in 5 years. And the rest of the money? Daniel waved his hand dismissively. Investments, probably. Maybe some property abroad. Don't worry about the details, Mum. I'll make sure it's all handled properly. I set down my wine glass and looked at this man I'd given birth to, raised alone after his father abandoned us, sacrificed my own dreams to ensure he had every advantage money could buy. Private schools, university, law school, a career handed to him through my connections, all of it funded by the inheritance my own mother had left me, carefully invested and multiplied over 30 years. And what about my care? I asked quietly. The treatments, the nursing, the hospice costs? Oh, that. Daniel picked up a strawberry, examining it like he was choosing jewelry. The NHS will handle most of it, won't they? And if not, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We'll cross that bridge. As if my medical care were a minor inconvenience that might or might not warrant his attention. I watched him eat my strawberries and drink my wine and plan the disposal of my assets with the same enthusiasm other people reserved for vacation planning. He was already spending my money in his mind, already planning his new life funded by my death. That's a lot to think about, I said finally. Not really. I've already had the paperwork drawn up. Daniel reached into his briefcase, the Hermes briefcase I'd given him for his last birthday, and pulled out a stack of legal documents. Just needs your signature, and everything will be sorted. Just needs your signature. He'd been so confident of my compliance that he'd had lawyers prepare documents transferring my entire estate to him before even asking my permission. I glanced at the papers: power of attorney, property transfers, investment account authorizations. Everything I owned, signed over to a man who saw my terminal illness as a convenient timeline for his inheritance. I should probably have my own lawyer review these, I said. Daniel's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Mom, that's just going to complicate things unnecessarily. And cost money we don't need to waste on legal fees. Money we don't need to waste. My money that he was already treating like his own. Still, it seems prudent. Look, Daniel interrupted, his voice taking on the edge of irritation he'd never quite learned to hide. We both know what's going to happen here. You're going to get sicker, you're going to need more care, and eventually I'm going to inherit everything anyway. This just makes the process cleaner for everyone. Cleaner for everyone. Meaning cleaner for him. You make it sound so simple. Because it is simple. You're dying, Mum. I'm your only heir. The money is going to be mine regardless. This just eliminates the waiting period. The waiting period. My remaining months of life, reduced to an inconvenient delay in his access to my bank accounts. I looked around the conservatory I'd designed and built, filled with furniture I'd chosen, decorated with flowers I'd grown, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not despair, something sharper than that. Something that felt remarkably like clarity. You're right, I said quietly. We should definitely make sure everything is handled properly. Daniel's face brightened. Exactly. I knew you'd see sense. I'll need a few days to organize everything with my lawyer. Make sure we haven't missed any details. Of course. Just don't take too long. Paperwork like this has a way of getting complicated if you sit on it. After Daniel left, taking the remaining strawberries for the road, I sat alone in my conservatory as the afternoon shadows lengthened across the flagstone floor. The wisteria still bloomed, the jasmine still perfumed the air, and my garden still stretched out in perfect order toward the distant woods. But something fundamental had changed in the space of a single lunch. My son, the child I'd loved more than my own life, the man I'd shaped and supported and cherished for 34 years, had revealed himself to be a stranger. Worse than a stranger. Strangers don't smile while they plan your funeral, don't eat your food while calculating the value of your silver, don't kiss your cheek while counting the days until you're dead. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized 40 years ago. Michael, it's Rose. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. Michael Hartwell had been our family lawyer since before Daniel was born, a man of absolute integrity and considerable cunning when the situation required it. Of course, Rose. Is everything all right? Everything is about to be exactly as it should be. That night, I lay in the bedroom I'd shared with Daniel's father for the 5 years of our marriage and the 29 years since his departure. The moonlight streamed through the windows I'd washed myself that morning, illuminating the photographs on my dressing table. Daniel as a baby, as a child, as a young man graduating university. In every photo, he was smiling. I'd thought those smiles were for me, expressions of love and gratitude and genuine affection. Now I understood they were the smiles of someone who'd been playing a very long game, waiting patiently for his investment in filial duty to pay dividends. The cancer would indeed kill me, probably within the year. But before it did, I was going to teach my son a lesson about the difference between inheriting money and earning it. Some gifts come with conditions. Some legacies require worthiness. And some mothers love their children enough to destroy them before they destroy themselves. Daniel thought my diagnosis had made me weak, desperate, easy to manipulate. He was about to learn that a woman facing her own mortality has a clarity of purpose that healthy people can't imagine. I was dying. He was not my heir. And the next few months were going to be very educational for both of us. I woke before dawn on Monday morning, not because of pain or medication schedules, but because clarity has a way of making sleep seem like a luxury you can't afford. I made tea in the kitchen I'd renovated 3 years ago, when I still thought I had decades of mornings ahead of me. The Aga cooker warmed the space with its gentle heat, and I stood at the window watching the sun rise over the gardens I might never see bloom again next spring. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was dying, but I felt more alive than I had in months. At 9 a.m. sharp, I knocked on the door of Hartwell and Associates, the law firm that occupied a converted Georgian townhouse in the center of our small market town. Michael Hartwell had purchased the building 30 years ago with the profits from a particularly lucrative corporate merger, and he'd restored it with the same attention to detail he brought to legal work. "Rose," he said, embracing me with the warmth of genuine friendship. "You look well." It was a lie, but a kind one. The chemotherapy had stolen 20 pounds and most of my energy, turning my once luxurious brown hair silver and making my skin translucent as parchment. But I dressed carefully that morning. A navy Chanel suit that had cost more than many people's monthly salary, pearls that had been my mother's, and lipstick that added color to lips that had gone pale with illness. If I was going to war, I was going to look like someone worthy of victory. "Michael, I need your help with something rather delicate." He led me to his office, a wood-paneled sanctuary lined with law books and family photographs. I'd been here countless times over the years. For my divorce, Daniel's university applications, property purchases, and investment planning. Now I was here to protect everything I'd built from the person who should have been protecting it himself. "Tell me what's happening," Michael said, settling behind his desk with the focused attention he gave to all his clients' problems. I told him about Sunday's lunch, repeating Daniel's words verbatim. Michael's expression grew increasingly grim as I spoke, particularly when I reached the part about the pre-prepared legal documents. "Rose, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain about Daniel's intentions? Sometimes grief and stress can make people say things they don't mean." "Michael, he's already had lawyers draft papers transferring my entire estate to him. He brought them to lunch like he was presenting a birthday gift." "May I see them?" I pulled the documents from my handbag. Michael reviewed them with a thoroughness that had made him one of the most respected attorneys in the county, his frown deepening as he turned each page. "These are remarkably comprehensive," he said finally, "and remarkably one-sided. If you sign these, Daniel would have complete control over all your assets immediately. You'd retain no authority over your own finances. Is that legal?"
Technically, yes.
"If you sign them voluntarily. But Rose, these documents are structured to benefit him, not you. There are no provisions for your care, no guarantees about how the money would be used, no protections for your interests whatsoever. So, if I became unable to make medical decisions or needed expensive treatment, he would have no legal obligation to spend any of your money on your care. In fact, He could theoretically put you in the cheapest available facility and use your assets for whatever he chose. The coldness of it was breathtaking. Not only had Daniel planned to inherit my money early, he'd structured the inheritance to ensure he had no responsibility for my well-being. Michael, I want to restructure everything. Immediately. What did you have in mind? I've been thinking about this since Sunday afternoon, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling while my son's words echoed in my memory. You don't have much time left anyway. The cancer will get you soon enough. I want to create a trust that will ensure my assets go to someone who deserves them. Daniel? Anyone but Daniel. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Rose, disinheriting your only child is a significant decision. Are you certain you want to proceed with something so drastic? What's drastic is a son who views his mother's death as a business opportunity. What's drastic is planning to spend your dying mother's money on luxury cars while she faces cancer treatments. Who would you want to benefit from the trust? I'd been thinking about that too. My mind had gone through everyone who'd shown me genuine kindness over the years, everyone who'd treated me as a person rather than a source of money. Anna Pemberton, I said. Michael's eyebrows rose. Your housekeeper? Anna had worked for me for 8 years, ever since her husband died, and left her with 2 young daughters to raise alone. She was 35 years old, quietly intelligent, and had never asked me for anything beyond her modest salary. When I'd been too sick to manage the house after chemotherapy sessions, she'd stayed late without being asked. When I'd been too weak to cook, she'd prepared meals and left them in containers labeled with heating instructions and encouraging notes. She treated me with dignity, even when I was at my weakest. Anna has 2 daughters to educate and a future to build. She's worked hard her entire life and never had the advantages that were handed to Daniel. Rose, that's a beautiful sentiment, but we're talking about £2.5 million. Are you certain you want to leave that much to someone outside your family? Michael, family is more than shared DNA. Anna has shown me more genuine care in the past 6 months than my own son has shown in years. What about Daniel? You can't leave him completely without resources. I thought about the Aston Martin he wanted to buy with my death money, about the mortgage he expected me to pay off, about his casual dismissal of my medical expenses. I'll leave Daniel exactly what he's earned through love and loyalty, which is nothing. Michael leaned back in his chair, studying me with the expression he wore when clients brought him particularly challenging cases. Rose, I've known you for 40 years. You're not a vindictive person. This doesn't sound like you. The Rose you've known for 40 years had a son who loved her. That woman died yesterday at lunch. The woman sitting here now has a son who sees her as an inconvenient obstacle to his inheritance. People can change, Rose. Stress and fear can make people behave badly temporarily. Michael, he said the cancer would get me soon enough. He said I didn't have much time left anyway. Those aren't words spoken in stress or fear. Those are words spoken by someone who's been waiting for me to die. I pulled out my phone and showed him a text Daniel had sent that morning. Mom, have you had a chance to look at those papers? Time is rather of the essence with these things. Time is rather of the essence. 24 hours after telling me I was dying, he was already pressuring me to sign away my assets. I see your point, Michael said quietly. Can you help me? I can help you create whatever kind of trust or will you want. But Rose, once we do this, there's no going back. If Daniel discovers he's been disinherited, your relationship with him will be over forever. I thought about that relationship, Sunday lunches where he calculated the value of my furniture, phone calls where he asked about my symptoms with the interest of someone monitoring an investment, visits where he looked around my house like he was taking inventory. Michael, that relationship has been over for longer than I wanted to admit. I'm just finally ready to acknowledge it. We spent the next 3 hours creating a legal structure that would protect my assets from the son who saw them as his inheritance and ensure they went to the woman who'd treated me as a human being worthy of dignity. By noon, everything was in place. Anna Pemberton would inherit my house, my investments, and my savings through a trust that would protect them from any legal challenges. Daniel would inherit my jewelry, not because I wanted to reward him, but because I wanted him to understand exactly how little his betrayal had earned him. "There's one more thing," I said as Michael prepared the final documents. "I don't want Daniel to know about any of this until after I'm gone." "Are you sure?" "It might be kinder to tell him now. Give him a chance to." "To what?" "Pretend to love me for the next few months in hopes of changing my mind? If Daniel wants to perform grief at my funeral, he can do it honestly." As I drove home from Michael's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my diagnosis. Peace. Not the peaceful acceptance of death that people talked about in support groups, but the peace that comes from making a decision that aligns with your deepest values. Daniel had revealed his true nature to me. Now I was going to reveal mine to him. That evening, he called to check on my progress with the paperwork. "Mom, I just wanted to make sure you were feeling all right about our conversation yesterday. I know it was a lot to process." "I'm processing it very thoroughly, darling." Good, good. "And the documents? Have you had a chance to review them?" "I've spent the entire day on legal matters, actually." "Excellent. So you'll be ready to sign soon?" "Oh, Daniel, I'll be ready very soon indeed." After I hung up, I walked through my house, the house I'd bought and renovated and filled with memories of the life I'd built after his father left us. Every room told the story of a woman who'd refused to be defeated by abandonment, who'd built something beautiful from the ruins of a failed marriage. Daniel thought that woman was weak, dying, easy to exploit. He was about to discover that some women grow stronger as they face their mortality, not weaker. The cancer might kill my body, but it had clarified my mind in ways that decades of health never had. I was ready for the next phase of this war. I need to pause Rose's story, here to share something that might change your life. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Just like Rose, you have more power than people realize, more wisdom than they give you credit for, and more options than they want you to know about. This book has already helped thousands of women discover their inner strength and take control of their lives, even when facing seemingly impossible circumstances. Whether you're dealing with family betrayal, health challenges, or simply feeling invisible in your own life, this book will show you practical steps to reclaim your dignity and write your own triumphant ending. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. Don't let anyone convince you that your best years are behind you. Rose is about to prove that the most powerful women are the ones who've been underestimated the longest. Now, let's see what happens when she puts her plan into motion. The documents were finalized on a Tuesday morning that felt like the first day of the rest of my life, however short that life might be. I sat in Michael Hartwell's office, signing papers that would reshape my family's future in ways Daniel couldn't imagine. Each signature felt like a small victory, each legal clause a shield against the greed my son had revealed so casually over Sunday lunch. "The trust is now irrevocable," Michael explained as I signed the final page. "Your assets are legally protected from any claims Daniel might make, either now or after your death. And Anna won't know anything about this until the will is read. The trust will be administered by the bank, so she'll have professional guidance in managing such a substantial inheritance." I thought about Anna, probably at this very moment cleaning my house with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. She had no idea that her life was about to change completely, that the two daughters she worried about constantly would have their education secured and their futures guaranteed. Michael, I want to establish one more thing. A small monthly allowance for Daniel, enough to live modestly, but not extravagantly. Michael looked surprised. I thought you wanted to disinherit him completely. I want him to understand the difference between earned inheritance and charity. The allowance will continue as long as he doesn't contest the will or harass Anna in any way. If he causes problems, it stops immediately. How much were you thinking? I considered the question. Daniel's current lifestyle required thousands of pounds a month, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, luxury holidays. The mortgage on his London flat alone was more than most people's annual income. £800 a month. Enough to rent a modest apartment and buy groceries. Enough to survive, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle he's grown accustomed to. That's quite a reduction from what he's expecting. That's the point. He'll have to learn to live within his means for the first time in his adult life. As I drove home from the lawyer's office, I felt the first real lightness I'd experienced since my diagnosis. The weight of knowing my hard-earned money might fund my son's selfishness had been replaced by the satisfaction of ensuring it would support someone who'd earned it through kindness rather than entitlement. Anna was in my kitchen when I arrived, preparing lunch with her usual attention to detail. She'd made a simple soup from vegetables in my garden, and the smell filled the house with warmth and comfort. Mrs. Tyler, you look pleased about something, she said, studying my expression as she ladled soup into a china bowl. I had a productive morning. Good meetings with the lawyers? Anna knew about my legal appointments, of course. She managed my calendar and had been discreetly handling more household responsibilities as my energy declined. But she assumed, like everyone else, that I was simply organizing my affairs in the straightforward way terminally ill people are supposed to do. Very productive. Anna, can I ask you something personal? She paused in her stirring, probably wondering what boundary we were about to cross in our carefully maintained employer-employee relationship. Of course. What do you want for your daughters? If money were no object, what would you want their lives to look like? Anna was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. At 35, she'd already learned that life rarely offers what you want, only what you're willing to work for. I want them to have choices, she said finally. I want Lucy to be able to study art at university without worrying about student loans. I want Sophie to pursue medicine if that's what makes her happy. I want them to travel, to see the world, to never have to choose between their dreams and financial security. And for yourself? Anna smiled ruefully. I gave up wanting things for myself when Tom died. Now I just want to make sure the girls have better opportunities than I did. What if I told you that might be possible? Mrs. Tyler, you've already been more generous than any employer has a right to be. The salary you pay me, the flexibility with my schedule when the girls are sick, you've given us stability I never thought we'd have again.
Stability.
Such a modest word for such a profound gift. Anna asked for stability while Daniel demanded luxury cars. That afternoon, Daniel called with his usual mixture of false concern and barely concealed impatience. Mom, how are you feeling today? Surprisingly well, actually. I had a very satisfying morning. Good to hear. And the legal documents? I don't want to pressure you, but time really is a factor with these things. Time really is a factor. He couldn't even pretend his urgency was about anything other than accessing my money quickly. Daniel, I've been thinking about what you said on Sunday, about the cancer getting me soon enough. A pause. I hope I didn't upset you. I was just being realistic about the situation. Realistic about the situation. As if planning to spend my money before I was dead was simply practical thinking. Not upset, no. Actually, it was quite clarifying. I've made some decisions that I think you'll find very illuminating. What kind of decisions? You'll find out soon enough. But Daniel, I want you to know that you've taught me something important about the difference between loving someone and enabling them. I'm not sure I follow. You will. After I hung up, I made myself tea and sat in the conservatory where this had all begun. The wisteria was still blooming, though some of the early flowers had begun to drop, leaving purple petals scattered across the flagstones like confetti from a celebration I hadn't been invited to. My phone rang again an hour later. Daniel, of course. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. If there's something bothering you about the inheritance arrangements, we can modify them. The important thing is that everything gets sorted out properly.
Modify them.
Meaning he was willing to make superficial changes to maintain the illusion that this was about my welfare rather than his convenience. What kind of modifications? Well, we could keep a small amount in your name for medical expenses. Say, £50,000? That should cover any unexpected costs. £50,000 out of $2.5 million. He was magnanimously offering to let me keep 2% of my own money for the privilege of dying with dignity. That's very generous of you, darling. I try to think of everything. So if we make that adjustment, would you be comfortable signing the papers? I'll be comfortable very soon, Daniel. More comfortable than I've been in months. That evening, I called Michael to confirm that everything was in place. The trust is completely secure, he assured me. Anna Pemberton will inherit your entire estate, with the exception of your jewelry collection, which will go to Daniel as specified. My jewelry collection. Mostly pieces from my mother and grandmother, with a few items I'd bought for myself over the years. Valuable, certainly, but nothing compared to the $2.5 million he'd been counting on. And the monthly allowance? £800, contingent on his acceptance of the will and his treatment of Anna. If he contests the inheritance or causes problems for her, the payments stop immediately. Perfect. Rose, are you sure you don't want to tell him about this before? Michael, my son told me the cancer would get me soon enough. He brought papers to my lunch table that would have stripped me of all financial autonomy while I'm dying. He deserves to discover the consequences of that choice exactly as I discovered his true nature, suddenly and completely. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the life I'd built and the legacy I was leaving. Not just the money, the lesson. Daniel had spent 34 years believing that love was unconditional, that family loyalty was automatic, that inheritance was a birthright rather than something to be earned. He was about to receive the most expensive education of his life. Some children learn their parents' values through example. Some children learn them through consequence. And some children are so busy calculating their inheritance that they forget to earn it. Daniel would have the rest of his life to understand which category he belonged to. Playing the role of a loving, trusting mother became my greatest performance. Over the following weeks, as spring turned toward summer, I maintained the pretense that nothing had changed between Daniel and me. I continued our Sunday lunches, answered his increasingly frequent phone calls about the paperwork, and even asked his advice about minor household decisions that I could have handled in my sleep. The deception was intoxicating. "Mom, you look tired," he said during our third Sunday lunch since the trust had been finalized. "Are you sure you should be doing all this cooking?" I was tired. The chemotherapy saw to that. But I was also energized by the secret knowledge that every moment of his false concern was being wasted on a woman who'd already seen through his performance. "I like keeping busy, darling. It makes me feel useful. Still, you should be taking it easier. Conserving your strength for? Well, for what's important." What's important? Meaning staying alive long enough to sign away my assets to him. Speaking of important things, Daniel continued, cutting into the roast lamb I'd prepared with hands that shook from medication. "Have you had a chance to review those documents with your solicitor?" "Oh yes, Michael and I have spent quite a lot of time on legal matters recently." Daniel's face brightened. "Excellent. So you'll be ready to move forward soon? Very soon. Everything is almost exactly as it should be. Almost. Well, there are always small details to finalize. But Michael assures me that everything will be perfectly legal and binding. That's all I want, Mom. Just to make sure everything is handled properly for both of us. Both of us. As if this arrangement were somehow benefiting me rather than simply expediting his access to my bank accounts. After he left, I called Anna into the sitting room where I was resting with a cup of tea and the Sunday papers. Anna, can you sit with me for a moment? She looked concerned. We didn't often have informal conversations, despite the years we'd worked together. Our relationship was warm but professional, built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. Is everything all right, Mrs. Tyler? Everything is perfect. I wanted to ask about your daughters. How are they doing in school? Anna's face lit up with the pride that transformed her from a quiet employee into a glowing mother. Lucy is top of her art class, and Sophie just won the science prize for her year. They're both working so hard. And their university plans? Well, we're looking at options that won't require too much debt. There are some good local programs, and if they work part-time. Anna's voice trailed off with the exhaustion of a woman who'd spent 8 years calculating every penny, planning every expense, weighing dreams against financial reality. What if money weren't a concern? I asked gently. Mrs. Tyler, that's not really a question I can afford to think about. But if it weren't, if the girls could attend any university they chose, study whatever subjects called to them, travel during their gap years if they wanted, what would that look like? Anna was quiet for a long moment, probably wondering why her terminally ill employer was engaging in such elaborate fantasies. I suppose Lucy would apply to art college in London. She's always dreamed of studying at the Royal College of Art, but the fees. Anna shrugged helplessly. And Sophie talks about wanting to be a doctor, but medical school is so expensive and the training takes so long. They sound like remarkable young women. They are. Sometimes I can't believe they're mine. I studied Anna's face, the worry lines earned through years of single parenthood, the premature silver in her hair from stress and responsibility, the hands rough from cleaning my house, and a dozen others before she found steady employment with me. Anna, have you ever thought about what you'd want to do if you didn't need to work? She laughed, but not unkindly. Mrs. Tyler, women like me don't get to retire. We work until we can't anymore, and then we hope our children are in a position to help. Women like me. Anna had no idea that in a few months, she'd be in a position to help anyone she chose. That evening, Daniel called with his usual mixture of impatience disguised as concern. Mom, I've been thinking, maybe I should come with you to your next appointment with Michael, just to make sure everything is being handled correctly. That's very thoughtful, but I'm quite capable of managing my own legal affairs. I know you are, but sometimes solicitors can be, well, they have their own interests in mind. I just want to make sure you're getting the best advice. The best advice. Meaning advice that would result in him getting my money as quickly as possible. Michael has been our family lawyer for 40 years, Daniel. I think I can trust his guidance. Of course, of course. I just thought, with everything you're dealing with, it might be helpful to have someone there to ask the right questions. What questions would those be? A pause. Just practical things. Timeline questions. Implementation details. You know. Timeline questions. He couldn't even pretend this was about anything other than when he'd have access to my accounts. Daniel, you seem quite anxious about these legal arrangements. Not anxious, just responsible. I want to make sure everything is handled properly so you can focus on your health. How considerate of you. After hanging up, I walked through my house in the evening light, seeing it with new eyes. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every carefully chosen detail would soon belong to Anna. She'd probably be overwhelmed at first, A woman who'd spent years budgeting every pound suddenly responsible for a house worth over £1 million and investments that generated more income in a month than she currently earned in a year. But she'd adapt. She'd use the money wisely, raise her daughters without financial anxiety, maybe even allow herself a few luxuries after years of self-denial. The next morning, I found Anna in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with her usual quiet efficiency. "Anna, I have a question for you. It might sound odd." She looked up from the eggs she was scrambling, her expression attentive. "What do you think makes someone deserving of good fortune?" Anna considered the question seriously, as she did most things. I think it's not about deserving exactly. Good fortune happens to all kinds of people, whether they deserve it or not. But what matters is what they do with it once they have it." "What do you mean?" "Well, some people who get money or power or opportunities use them to help others. They remember what it was like to struggle, and they try to make life easier for people still struggling. But others—" Anna paused, choosing her words carefully. "Others seem to think good fortune is proof that they're special, that they were always meant to have more than other people." "And which type of person do you think you are?" Anna looked surprised by the question. "Mrs. Tyler, I've never had enough good fortune to know for certain. But I hope if I ever did, I'd remember what it feels like to worry about money, to choose between heating and groceries, to watch your children want things you can't provide. I think you would remember." 2 days later, I received a call from Michael's office that made me smile for the first time in weeks. "Mrs. Tyler? This is Sarah from Mr. Hartwell's office. I'm calling because Daniel Tyler has been trying to schedule an appointment to discuss your estate planning. He's called 3 times today, actually." "Has he now?" "He seems quite insistent. Says it's urgent family business." "What did you tell him?" "That we can't discuss a client's affairs with anyone without explicit written permission." But he's becoming rather persistent. Daniel was losing patience with my failure to hand over my assets on his timeline. "Sarah, if Daniel calls again, please tell him that all my legal affairs are being handled exactly as I wish them to be handled, and that when I require his input, I'll ask for it." "Of course, Mrs. Tyler." That afternoon, Daniel arrived at my house unannounced, letting himself in with the key I'd given him years ago for emergencies. He found me in the conservatory, reading a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt and enjoying the afternoon sunshine. "Mom, we need to talk." "Hello, darling." What a pleasant surprise. "I've been trying to reach your solicitor, but they won't speak with me." "Of course they won't. Client confidentiality is rather important in legal matters." Daniel sat down across from me, his expression more serious than I'd seen it since his university days. "Mom, I'm concerned that you're not being properly advised about your estate planning. These things can be complicated, and sometimes elderly clients don't fully understand the implications."
Elderly client.
You know what I mean. People who are dealing with illness, medication, stress, sometimes they need advocates to make sure their interests are protected. "And you believe you should be my advocate?" "I'm your son. I'm your only family. Of course, I should be involved in these decisions." I set down my book and looked at this man who shared my DNA, but apparently none of my values. "Daniel, why do you think you're entitled to my money?" The directness of the question clearly caught him off guard. What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I asked. Why do you believe you're entitled to my assets?" "I don't think I'm entitled to anything. I just think it makes sense for everything to be transferred now, while you're still able to oversee the process." "But why do you specifically? Why not to charity, or to Anna, or to someone else entirely?" Daniel stared at me as if I'd suggested giving my money to aliens. "Because I'm your son. And that's sufficient reason?" "Of course it is. I'm your heir. This is how inheritance works." "Is it? Do you think inheritance should be automatic, regardless of behavior? Regardless of how children treat their parents?" Mom, where's this coming from? We've always had a good relationship. Have we? Daniel, when was the last time you visited me without asking for money or discussing my financial affairs? He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. When was the last time you called simply to see how I was feeling, without steering the conversation toward legal documents? Another pause. When was the last time you treated me like a person you loved rather than an investment you were monitoring? Daniel's face flushed red. That's not fair. I've been trying to help you manage a difficult situation. Difficult for whom? For both of us. Daniel, the only thing that's been difficult for you is waiting for me to die so you can inherit my money. Everything else, my illness, my treatment, my emotional needs, those have been inconveniences you've tried to manage as efficiently as possible. That's not true. Isn't it? You told me the cancer would get me soon enough. You brought legal documents to lunch that would strip me of all financial autonomy. You've called my solicitor 3 times in one day, pressuring him to expedite paperwork that benefits only you. Daniel stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the gardens I might not see bloom again. Mom, I admit I've been focused on practical matters. But that's because someone has to be. You're ill, you're not thinking clearly about the future, and if we don't get these arrangements sorted out. If we don't get them sorted out, what? You might have to wait until I actually die to inherit my money? It's not about the money, isn't it? Then why does every conversation we have end up being about financial arrangements? Why do you know more about my investment portfolio than my treatment schedule? Why do you ask about legal documents, but never about how I'm coping with the knowledge that I'm dying? Daniel turned back to me, his expression a mixture of anger and something that might have been guilt. I don't know how to talk to you about dying. So, you decided to talk about money instead? It's easier. Easier for you, not easier for me. We stared at each other across the space that had once held love and now held only the brittle architecture of biological obligation. What do you want from me, Mum? Nothing, Daniel. That's what you've never understood. I've never wanted anything from you except love, respect, and the knowledge that raising you is worthwhile. But you've been so busy calculating your inheritance that you forgot to earn it. I haven't forgotten anything. Haven't you? When did you last ask how I'm sleeping? When did you last want to hear about my fears, my hopes, my thoughts about dying? When did you last treat me like your mother instead of your investment? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. It's going to be different now, he said finally. I'll do better. Will you? Or will you perform better until you get what you want? I mean it, Mum. I'll be the son you deserve. I looked at this man who thought love was something you could turn on and off like a tap, who believed relationships were transactions that could be renegotiated when the terms became inconvenient. Daniel, some lessons come too late to change the outcome. Some apologies arrive after the damage is already done. What's that supposed to mean? It means that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. After he left, promising to call more often and visit more regularly and be the son I deserved, I sat alone in my conservatory as the afternoon shadows lengthened across the flagstones. He would probably keep his promises for a few weeks. He'd perform love with the same desperation he'd shown in pursuing my money. But it would be performance, not transformation. Some people change their behavior when they realize it's costing them something important. Other people only change their tactics. Daniel was about to discover which category he belonged to. Anna found me crying on a Thursday morning in early June. I was sitting in my bedroom, surrounded by photo albums I'd pulled from storage, looking at pictures of Daniel's childhood and wondering when the sweet boy in those images had become the calculating man who now saw my death as a business opportunity. Mrs. Tyler? Anna's voice was soft with concern. Are you all right? I looked up to see her standing in the doorway, holding the breakfast tray she brought to my room on mornings when the chemotherapy left me too weak to make it downstairs.
I'm sorry, Anna.
I didn't mean for you to see me like this. Please don't apologize. You're facing something unimaginable. You're allowed to cry. She set the tray on my dressing table and sat carefully on the edge of my bed, close enough to offer comfort, but far enough to maintain the respectful boundaries she'd always observed. Is there anything I can do to help? I looked at this woman who'd cared for me with such quiet dignity, who'd never asked for anything beyond fair wages and the flexibility to be present for her daughters when they needed her. In 8 years, she'd never gossiped about my personal affairs, never taken advantage of my trust, never treated me with anything less than genuine respect. She was everything Daniel wasn't. Anna, can I tell you something? Something I probably shouldn't share with anyone. Of course. I'm not leaving my estate to Daniel. Anna went very still. Mrs. Tyler, you don't need to discuss your personal affairs with me. I know I don't need to. I want to. Anna, my son has made it very clear that he's eagerly anticipating my death so he can inherit my money. He even brought legal documents to lunch, trying to get me to sign over everything immediately. Oh my God. He told me the cancer would get me soon enough anyway, so I might as well transfer my assets to him now to avoid tax complications. Anna's face went pale.
He didn't. He did.
He's called my solicitor repeatedly, pressuring him to expedite paperwork. He asks about my symptoms only to calculate how much time he has left to wait. He sees me as an inconvenient delay in accessing what he considers his rightful inheritance. Mrs. Tyler, I'm so sorry. That must be heartbreaking. It was. But then I realized something. I have a choice about where my money goes. And I've decided it should go to someone who's earned it through kindness rather than someone who expects it through biology. Anna was quiet for a long moment. What are you saying? I'm saying that you've shown me more genuine care in 8 years than my son has shown in his entire adult life. You've treated me with dignity, even when I was at my weakest. You've never asked for anything you hadn't earned. You've been the daughter I never had. Mrs. Tyler, Anna, I've created a trust that will leave everything to you. The house, the investments, all of it. When I die, you'll inherit my entire estate. Anna stared at me in complete shock. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. And completely certain. But I'm your housekeeper. Daniel is your son. Daniel is a stranger who happens to share my DNA. You're the person who's actually been part of my life. Anna stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the gardens where her daughter sometimes played while she worked. Mrs. Tyler, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not right. Why isn't it right? Because I haven't done anything to deserve such generosity. I've just done my job. Anna, you've done much more than your job. You've stayed late when I was too sick to manage alone. You've prepared meals and left encouraging notes. You've treated me like a person rather than an employer. You've shown genuine concern for my well-being without any expectation of reward. That's just basic human decency. Is it? Because my own son hasn't managed that level of basic human decency. Anna turned back to me, her eyes filled with tears. Mrs. Tyler, what about your family? What about Daniel? You can't disinherit your only child. I can and I have. Anna, Daniel made his choice when he decided to view my terminal illness as an opportunity rather than a tragedy. I'm making mine by ensuring my assets go to someone who values people over money. But the amount, it's life-changing money. I don't know how to handle that kind of responsibility. You'll learn. You're intelligent, you're honest, and you understand the value of things because you've worked for everything you've ever had. Those qualities matter more than financial experience. Anna sat back down on the bed, her expression overwhelmed. What about my daughters? How do I explain to them that their lives suddenly changed because their mother cleaned houses for a living? You tell them that kindness has value, that treating people with dignity matters, That hard work and integrity are rewarded, even if sometimes the reward comes from unexpected sources. Mrs. Tyler, this is too much. I need time to think, to process. Anna, you have time. I'm not dead yet. But I wanted you to know, because you're going to need to prepare for some significant changes in your life. What about Daniel? What will you leave him? My jewelry collection. Valuable pieces, but nothing compared to what he was expecting. He'll be furious. He'll be devastated. But devastation builds character if you're capable of learning from it. That afternoon, I called Michael to add another provision to the trust. I want to include Anna's daughters specifically, I told him. Education funds, separate from the main inheritance, so they're protected even if something happens to Anna. How much? Enough for university, graduate school if they choose, and a house deposit when they're ready. Say, 200,000 each. Rose, that's extraordinarily generous. Those girls are going to grow up understanding that their opportunities came from their mother's kindness. That's a lesson worth any amount of money. And Daniel will learn a different lesson entirely. That evening, Daniel called with his usual blend of false concern and barely concealed impatience. Mom, how was your day? You sounded tired when I spoke to Anna earlier. You spoke to Anna? I called the house and she answered. Just checking to make sure you were all right. And what did Anna tell you? Just that you'd had a difficult morning. She seemed, I don't know, different somehow. Distracted. She's probably tired. She works very hard. Speaking of Anna, Mum, I've been thinking. Afterward, you'll need to consider what happens to the household staff. I mean, the new arrangements might not require the same level of service. The new arrangements. He couldn't even pretend he was thinking about Anna's welfare rather than calculating expenses he didn't want to pay. What would you suggest? Well, Anna's been with you for 8 years. A generous severance package would be appropriate. Maybe 6 months' salary. 6 months' salary. For 8 years of loyal service and the promise of unemployment when I died. That seems rather modest. Mum, you have to be practical. The estate will have other obligations. What obligations would those be? Well, my expenses will increase significantly. The mortgage, the car payments, general living costs. It's important to preserve capital for the long term. Preserve capital for the long term. Meaning preserve money for Daniel's long-term comfort. I see. And you think 6 months' salary is sufficient thanks for 8 years of dedicated service? It's generous, Mum. Most employers don't provide any severance at all. You're right, Daniel. Most employers aren't in a position to be truly generous when the opportunity arises. Exactly. So we're in agreement about the staff situation? Oh, we're in complete agreement about Anna's future. Completely. After I hung up, I walked through my house thinking about the different futures Daniel and I were planning for Anna. In his future, she'd receive 6 months' pay and then struggle to find new employment while raising 2 daughters alone. In my future, she'd never have to worry about money again. Some gifts change a life temporarily. Some gifts change a life forever. Anna was about to discover which kind she'd earned. By midsummer, Daniel's true nature had emerged with the clarity of a Polaroid photograph developing in harsh light. He'd increased his visits to twice weekly, ostensibly to check on my health, but actually to monitor my condition like a stockbroker watching a volatile market. Each conversation circled back to my energy levels, my treatment response, my prognosis, not from concern, but from what I'd come to recognize as investment anxiety. Mum, you look pale today, he said during one July afternoon visit, studying my face with the attention of someone reading financial reports. Are you eating enough? I'm eating as much as I can manage. Maybe you should consider nutritional supplements. Keep your strength up. Keep your strength up. Not for my comfort or quality of life, but to maintain the asset he was planning to inherit. Daniel, Why do you want me to stay strong? The questions seemed to confuse him. Because I want you to feel well.
Do you?
Or, do you want me to stay healthy enough to handle legal paperwork? That's a terrible thing to suggest. Is it? You've never shown interest in my comfort before. You ask about my appetite, but never offer to cook. You mention my energy, but never offer to help with household tasks. Your concern seems very specific. Daniel's jaw tightened. I'm trying to be supportive. Are you? Or are you trying to manage an investment that's taking longer to mature than you expected? The accusation hung between us like smoke. Outside, Anna was working in the garden with her daughters, who'd come to help with the heavier tasks I could no longer manage. Lucy, 17 now, had inherited her mother's quiet competence. Sophie, 15, had her mother's gentle nature combined with a sharp intelligence that would serve her well in medical school. They were laughing together as they weeded the flower beds, their voices carrying through the open windows like music from a life I'd never quite managed to create with my own child. Mom, I know you're going through a difficult time, but you're starting to sound paranoid. Paranoid. The word Daniel used whenever I questioned his motives or pointed out the selfish nature of his concerns. Am I? Daniel, answer me honestly. If I had no money, would you be visiting twice a week? Of course I would. Would you? When your father left and we were living on my secretary's salary, you complained constantly about not having the things your friends had. You blamed me for not providing a lifestyle I couldn't afford. I was a child then. And now that I have money, you visit regularly. You call frequently. You're very concerned about my legal affairs. But you've never once asked how I feel about dying, what I'm afraid of, what I hope for in the time I have left. Daniel stood up and walked to the window, watching Anna and her daughters with an expression I couldn't quite read. Those are difficult conversations. Difficult for whom? For both of us. Daniel, I'm the one who's dying. If anyone should find these conversations difficult, it should be me. But I don't. I find them necessary. What do you want me to say, Mum? That I'm terrified of losing you? That I can't bear to think about a world without you in it? That I lie awake at night wondering how I'll cope when you're gone?
Do you?
Do any of those things. He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. I think about practical things, he said finally. About arrangements that need to be made, responsibilities that need to be handled. It's easier than thinking about the other stuff. What other stuff? The emotional stuff. The feelings. I looked at my son, 34 years old, and still running from emotional complexity like a child hiding from monsters under the bed. Daniel, do you love me? Of course I love you.
How?
How do you love me? What does that love look like in your daily life? What do you mean? I mean when you think about me, what do you feel? When you imagine your life without me, what do you mourn? When you consider my death, what will you miss? Daniel stared at me as if I'd asked him to solve calculus in his head. I'll miss our conversations, our lunches together. Will you? Or will you miss having someone to ask for money when you need it? That's not fair. Isn't it? Daniel, name one thing you'll miss about me that doesn't involve financial benefit to you. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I can't answer that right now. I'm too upset. You're upset because I'm challenging you to examine your feelings, or because you're realizing what those feelings actually are? Daniel picked up his jacket and car keys. I should go. You're obviously having a difficult day. I'm having a clarifying day. There's a difference. After he left, Anna came inside with dirt under her fingernails and satisfaction on her face. The girls and I finished the herb garden, she said. Lucy wants to try growing her own vegetables next year. Next year. The phrase I tried not to think about, the time I probably wouldn't see. Mrs. Tyler, will the new owners want to maintain the gardens? I know it's not my place to ask, but Lucy's gotten quite attached to this project. The new owners. Anna had no idea she was talking about herself. I think the new owners will appreciate everything you and the girls have done here. I think they'll want to continue the tradition of beautiful gardens and well-loved plants. I hope so. It would be a shame to let all this beauty go to waste. That evening, I received a phone call that confirmed everything I'd suspected about Daniel's priorities. Mrs. Tyler? This is David Blackwood from Blackwood Finance. Your son Daniel asked me to call you about investment consulting services. I'm sorry. He said you were looking for advice about restructuring your portfolio to maximize returns during your remaining time. He thought you might benefit from more aggressive investment strategies. More aggressive investment strategies. Daniel had contacted financial advisors about managing my money before he'd even inherited it. Mr. Blackwood, I haven't expressed any interest in investment consulting.
Oh.
Well, Daniel seemed quite certain you were ready to make some significant changes to your financial arrangements. He mentioned that time was a factor in the decision-making process. I'm sure he did. Should I not prepare the portfolio analysis he requested? Mr. Blackwood, any changes to my financial arrangements will be handled through my existing solicitor. I suggest you contact Daniel and clarify exactly what authority he believes he has over my assets. Of course. I apologize for any confusion. After hanging up, I called Michael Hartwell. Michael, Daniel is contacting investment firms about my portfolio. He's presenting himself as someone with authority to make changes to my financial arrangements. That's concerning. He has no legal standing to discuss your assets with anyone. I know, but it tells me something important about his timeline. He's not just planning to inherit my money, he's actively preparing to manage it. What do you want to do? Document everything. If he's going to present himself as my financial representative, I want evidence of every instance. When the will is read, I want a complete record of his presumption. Consider it done. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the difference between loving someone and possessing them. Daniel had never learned to separate the two concepts. To him, love was ownership, relationship was transaction, family was a financial arrangement rather than an emotional bond. Anna understood the difference. She loved her daughters enough to work multiple jobs to support them, to sacrifice her own comfort for their opportunities, to put their needs ahead of her own desires. Her love was service, not ownership. Daniel's love was calculation disguised as concern. Some children learn that love is given freely and returned through choice. Some children learn that love is a commodity to be leveraged for personal gain. Daniel was about to discover the cost of confusing the two. August brought a heat wave that seemed to leach what little energy I had left for my body. The oncologist had been honest during my last appointment. The treatments were losing their effectiveness, and my time was measured in months rather than years. Dr. Harrison had gentle eyes and 20 years of experience delivering news that shattered families, but he'd never learned to make the words less devastating. Mrs. Tyler, we need to discuss your care options going forward. You mean hospice? I mean ensuring your remaining time is as comfortable and dignified as possible. Comfortable and dignified. Such modest goals for the end of a life. How long? It's difficult to say precisely. Perhaps 3 to 6 months, depending on how you respond to palliative treatment. 3 to 6 months. Enough time to see the autumn colors, possibly Christmas, but not another spring in my gardens. I'd driven home from that appointment feeling oddly peaceful. Not resigned, exactly, but clear about what needed to be accomplished in the time I had left. That evening, Daniel called with his usual performance of concern. Mom, how did the appointment go today? As expected, the cancer is progressing. A pause. What does that mean exactly? What does that mean exactly? Not how are you feeling or what can I do to help, but a request for specific information about the timeline. It means we're moving into palliative care rather than curative treatment. And the timeline for everything? Everything. He couldn't even say your death. Dr. Harrison estimates 3 to 6 months. I heard Daniel take a sharp breath. That's sooner than we expected.
We.
I mean sooner than I hoped. Mum, this changes things. We really need to get your affairs in order immediately. My affairs are in perfect order, Daniel. But the legal documents, the transfers, if something happens suddenly, there could be complications. What kind of complications? Probate issues, tax problems, delays in accessing funds for your care. Mum, we can't afford to wait any longer. We can't afford to wait. He was talking about my death like a business deadline that needed to be met efficiently. Daniel, what funds for my care? Well, hospice costs, private nursing, whatever you need to be comfortable. And after those expenses, what happens to the remaining money? What do you mean? I mean after my medical bills are paid, where does the rest of my estate go? To me, obviously. I'm your heir. Obviously? Mum, where else would it go? I'm your son, your only family. The money should stay in the family. Should stay in the family. As if money had natural habitat requirements. Daniel, why should it stay in the family? Because that's how inheritance works. Parents leave their assets to their children. Do they? Regardless of how those children have treated them. We've been through this, Mum. I know I haven't been perfect, but I'm trying to do better.
Are you?
Or are you trying to manage me more effectively until you get what you want? That's unfair. Is it? Daniel, since my diagnosis, you've shown more interest in my financial affairs than my physical condition. You know more about my investment portfolio than my medication schedule. You've contacted financial advisors about managing money you don't own yet. How did you? He stopped himself. How did I know? Because Mr. Blackwood called me, confused about why my son was requesting portfolio analyses for assets he has no authority over. Silence. Daniel, why are you planning to manage my money before you've inherited it? I was just preparing, making sure I understood the complexities involved. Were you? Or were you making sure you could access my accounts as quickly as possible after I die? Mum, you're not thinking clearly. The medication, the stress of everything, it's affecting your judgment. My judgment is perfectly clear. Clear enough to see that you're treating my death like a business transaction you're eager to complete. That's not true. Isn't it? You asked for timeline information within minutes of learning about my prognosis. You immediately shifted the conversation to legal complications and fund access. You've never once asked how I'm coping emotionally with the knowledge that I'm dying. I don't know how to have that conversation. Then learn. Because I'm your mother and I'm dying, and if you can't find a way to talk to me about something other than money, then we have nothing left to say to each other. I hung up and sat in the gathering dusk of my conservatory, watching Anna deadhead the roses with her usual careful attention. Her daughters were helping, Lucy artistic in her approach to garden design, Sophie methodical in her technique. They were creating beauty together, while my son and I were destroying what little relationship we had left. That night, I wrote 3 letters. The first was to Anna. Dear Anna, by the time you read this, my battle with cancer will be over. I want you to know that the years you've worked for me have been among the happiest of my widowhood. You've treated me with dignity, kindness, and respect during a time when I desperately needed all 3. You're about to discover that I've left you my entire estate. Please don't feel guilty about this decision. You've earned it through years of genuine care. Use this gift to give your daughters every opportunity one couldn't give my son, not because of money, but because of character. Teach them that wealth is a responsibility, not a privilege. Show them that money should serve people, not the reverse. Help them understand that the greatest inheritance anyone can leave is the example of how to treat others with decency. You've been the daughter of my heart, Anna. I couldn't be prouder of the woman you are or more confident in the woman you're raising your girls to become. With love and gratitude, Rose. The second letter was to Daniel. Daniel, if you're reading this, you've just learned that I've left you my jewelry collection and nothing else. You're probably angry, confused, and feeling betrayed. Let me explain. You told me the cancer would get me soon enough. You brought legal documents to lunch trying to pressure me into signing away my assets. You contacted financial advisors about managing money you hadn't inherited yet. You treated my terminal diagnosis as an inconvenience that was delaying your access to what you considered your rightful inheritance. You forgot that love is earned, not owed. You forgot that respect is reciprocal, not automatic. You forgot that I was your mother, not your investment. Anna Pemberton, my housekeeper, has inherited everything because she remembered all the things you forgot. She treated me like a human being worthy of dignity rather than an asset to be managed. She earned through kindness what you lost through greed. I hope you learn from this experience. I hope you discover that relationships are about more than financial benefit. I hope you become the man I once believed you could be. But if you don't learn, if you spend the rest of your life bitter and angry about this outcome, remember this. You had 34 years to earn my respect and affection. You chose to spend the last months of my life calculating your inheritance instead. Some choices can't be undone. Rose Tyler. The third letter was to Michael Hartwell. Dear Michael, by the time you read this, Daniel will have discovered the contents of my will. He'll probably contact you immediately, demanding explanations and threatening legal action. Please give him the second letter I've enclosed with this one. Then explain that the will is ironclad, the trust is irrevocable, and any attempt to contest my decisions will result in the immediate termination of his monthly allowance. Daniel had every opportunity to be the son I raised him to be. He chose to be someone else entirely. I've made my choice as well. Thank you for your friendship and your service over so many years. Take care of Anna. She's going to need guidance as she learns to manage the responsibility I've given her. With appreciation, Rose Tyler. I sealed the 3 letters and placed them in my safe, next to the will and trust documents that would reshape my family's future. Then I called Dr. Harrison's office and arranged to begin hospice care. It was time to prepare for the end of this war. I died on a Tuesday morning in October, with Anna holding my hand and autumn sunlight streaming through the windows of the bedroom I'd shared with no one for 29 years. But that's getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the weeks leading up to that peaceful morning, when the war I'd been fighting reached its final, decisive phase. September had been a month of contrasts, my body weakening as my resolve strengthened, Daniel's desperation growing as his timeline shortened. The hospice nurses who came twice daily were gentle, professional women who treated death as a natural transition rather than a medical failure. They understood that dignity mattered more than duration, that comfort trumped cure. Daniel understood none of this. "Mom, are you sure about the hospice decision?" he asked during what would be our last Sunday lunch together. I'd managed only a few spoonfuls of the soup Anna had prepared, my appetite diminished to almost nothing. "There are experimental treatments, clinical trials, alternative approaches." "Daniel, I'm tired of fighting. But if there's a chance..." "A chance of what?" "Living another few months while feeling worse every day? Spending my final weeks in hospital rooms instead of my own home. A chance of more time together." I looked at this man who'd spent the past months treating our time together as an inconvenience to be managed efficiently, and wondered if he actually believed his own words. "Daniel, what would you do with more time together?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, if I lived another year, another 2 years, what would be different about our relationship? Would you suddenly start calling to talk about something other than legal documents? Would you visit without checking on my financial arrangements? Would you ask about my fears and hopes instead of my prognosis?" Yes, I would. Would you? Or would you just become more sophisticated in your manipulation? Daniel set down his fork and looked at me with what might have been genuine hurt. Mum, I know I've made mistakes. I know I've been focused on practical matters when I should have been focused on you. But if I had more time, I could do better. Daniel, you've had 34 years to do better. Time hasn't been your limitation, choice has been. That's not fair. What's not fair is a son who sees his mother's terminal illness as a timeline for inheritance planning. I was trying to protect you from complications. You were trying to protect yourself from delays in accessing my money. We stared at each other across the distance that had grown between us. Not physical distance, but the chasm that opens when people discover they've fundamentally misunderstood each other for years. What can I do to make this right? Daniel asked finally. Nothing. That's what you've never understood, Daniel. Some damage can't be repaired through better behavior after the fact. Some trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt on a deadline. So, you're just giving up on us? I'm accepting reality. You've shown me who you are, and I've made my decisions accordingly. That was our last real conversation. Daniel continued to visit, continued to call, continued to hover around my declining health with the anxious energy of someone waiting for news he couldn't quite bring himself to hope for. Anna, meanwhile, became my anchor to whatever dignity remained in the dying process. She managed the hospice schedule, coordinated with the nurses, prepared the few foods I could still stomach, and maintained the routines that kept my house feeling like a home rather than a medical facility. More importantly, she talked to me like a person instead of a patient. Mrs. Tyler, Lucy got accepted to art college. She told me one afternoon in late September, her face glowing with maternal pride. Full scholarship based on the portfolio she developed in your gardens. I'm so proud of her. She wants to specialize in botanical illustration. Says working with your plants taught her to see beauty in details she'd never noticed before. Lucy's future, secured not through inheritance, but through talent nurtured in soil I'd provided. It felt like a kind of immortality. And Sophie? Still determined to become a doctor. Her grades are excellent, and she's been volunteering at the hospice center. Says watching how the nurses care for you has shown her what medicine should really be about. What's that? Dignity. She says the nurses treat you like you're still fully yourself, just in a different phase of life. Sophie's wisdom at 15, understanding something Daniel had never grasped at 34. Anna, there's something I need you to do for me. Anything. After I'm gone, I want you to wait at least 6 months before making any major changes to the house or your life. You're going to be overwhelmed at first, and people will pressure you to make quick decisions. Don't. Mrs. Tyler, you don't need to worry about. I need to know you'll be thoughtful about this responsibility. The money is substantial enough to change not just your life, but your character if you're not careful. Anna was quiet for a moment. Are you afraid I'll become someone different? I'm afraid the world will treat you differently, and you'll start to believe their treatment reflects your worth rather than your wealth. How do I prevent that? Remember who you were before. Remember the values that earned you this inheritance. And most importantly, remember that money amplifies character. It doesn't create it. In early October, as the trees outside my windows turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson, I made my final preparations. I gave Michael Hartwell detailed instructions about the will reading, including specific timing and the order in which information should be revealed. I wanted Daniel to fully understand the magnitude of what he'd lost before learning where it had gone. I recorded a video message for Anna's daughters, knowing they'd need to hear directly from me why their lives had changed so dramatically. Lucy and Sophie deserved to understand that their opportunities came from their mother's character, not from random good fortune. Most importantly, I wrote a final letter to myself, not to be shared with anyone, but to clarify my own thoughts about the choice I'd made. Rose, you're about to die, and your son believes he's about to become wealthy. In a few weeks, he'll discover that his greed has cost him everything he was counting on. Some people will think you were cruel to disinherit your only child. Some will argue that blood should trump behavior, that family obligation should override personal disappointment. They're wrong. Love without respect is manipulation. Family without reciprocity is exploitation. Inheritance without earning is enablement. You gave Daniel 34 years to learn these lessons. He chose not to learn them. Now he'll spend the rest of his life understanding the cost of that choice. Anna will use your money to build something beautiful, educated daughters, a secure future, probably help for other people facing the struggles she's overcome. She'll honor your memory through her choices. Daniel will spend years angry about what he lost, but he might eventually understand what he threw away. If he does learn, if he does grow, if he does become the man he could have been, then this lesson will be the greatest gift you ever gave him. If he doesn't learn, then you've protected your life's work from being wasted on someone who would have squandered both the money and the lesson. Either way, you've made the right choice.
Die peacefully. Rose.
On the morning I died, Anna had brought me tea and toast I was too weak to eat. We sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint my gardens in shades of gold and amber. The wisteria had finished blooming months ago, but the roses were still producing late flowers, determined to create beauty until the first frost ended their season. "Mrs. Tyler," Anna said quietly, "is there anything you need? Anything I can do to make you more comfortable?"
You've already done it, Anna.
"You've given me the gift of being seen as myself instead of my illness. You've treated me with dignity when I had very little left. You have more dignity than anyone I've ever known. Then you understand why I made the choices I made. I understand that you chose to reward love over obligation. I understand that you chose to invest in someone who'd proven trustworthy rather than someone who expected trust without earning it." I smiled at this woman who'd somehow become the daughter I'd never had, who'd shown me that family could be chosen rather than just inherited. "Anna, promise me something. Anything. Use this gift well. Not just the money, but the freedom it brings. Show your daughters that security allows generosity, that having enough means you can afford to help others have enough too." "I promise." An hour later, I closed my eyes in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by the love I'd chosen rather than the love I'd been born to. Anna was holding my hand. The autumn sun was warm on my face. And somewhere in London, Daniel was probably checking his phone to see if there were any updates on my condition. Some deaths are endings. Some deaths are conclusions. Mine was a victory. The will reading took place on a gray November morning in Michael Hartwell's office, exactly as I'd planned it. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in the expensive black suit he'd bought for occasions that required him to look appropriately grieving. He'd worn it to my funeral 3 days earlier, where he'd delivered a eulogy full of memories he'd probably researched the night before and emotions he'd performed with the skill of a seasoned actor. Anna arrived precisely on time, wearing a simple navy dress and the pearl earrings I'd given her last Christmas. She looked overwhelmed by the formality of the setting, but she held herself with the quiet dignity that had made me choose her as my heir. Michael had followed my instructions exactly. Daniel would learn about his inheritance first, then discover where the bulk of the estate had gone. I wanted him to experience the full arc of realization, expectation, disappointment, and understanding, in carefully orchestrated stages. "Thank you both for coming," Michael began, settling behind his desk with the ceremonial gravity these occasions required. Rose was very specific about how she wanted this information presented. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression appropriately somber, but his eyes bright with anticipation. Anna sat quietly, probably wondering why she'd been included in what she assumed was a family matter. "Daniel, your mother has left you her complete jewelry collection, including pieces that belonged to your grandmother and great-grandmother. These items have been appraised at approximately £50,000. I wished I could have seen Daniel's face in that moment. The flicker of confusion, the quick mental calculation, the dawning realization that £50,000 was nowhere near the 2.5 million he'd been expecting. "I'm sorry," Daniel said carefully. "Is that the complete inheritance?" "The jewelry collection. That represents your complete inheritance from your mother's will?" "Yes." "But what about the house? The investments? The savings accounts?" Michael referred to his notes with the deliberate pace I'd requested. "Your mother has made alternative arrangements for those assets." "Alternative arrangements? What does that mean?" "It means she's directed them elsewhere." Daniel's carefully controlled composure began to crack. "Where elsewhere?" Michael turned to Anna, whose face had gone pale as she began to understand why she'd been invited to this meeting. "Anna, Rose has left you the entirety of her remaining estate. This includes the house and all its contents, her investment portfolio, her savings accounts, and her real estate holdings. The total value is approximately £2.5 million. Anna made a sound that might have been a gasp or a sob. Daniel made no sound at all. "I'm sorry," Anna said, her voice barely audible. "There must be some mistake. I'm Mrs. Tyler's housekeeper." "There's no mistake," Michael replied gently. "Rose was very clear about her intentions." Daniel found his voice, though it came out higher than usual. "This is impossible. I'm her son. I'm her only heir. There must be some error in the documentation." "There's no error, Daniel. Your mother was mentally competent when she made these arrangements. She worked with me over several months to ensure everything was legally sound." "But I don't understand," Anna said, tears streaming down her face. "Why would she leave me anything, let alone this much?" Michael pulled out the first letter I'd written, the one addressed to Anna. "She left this for you." Anna's hands shook as she read my explanation of why I'd chosen her, why I believed she'd earned this responsibility, why I trusted her with the legacy I'd built over 60 years of careful living. Daniel watched her read, with growing desperation. "There has to be a mistake. Mom wouldn't do this. She wouldn't leave everything to the help." The help. Even in his shock, Daniel's true feelings about Anna's place in our household emerged with ugly clarity. Michael pulled out the second letter. "Daniel, your mother left this for you." Daniel practically snatched the envelope from Michael's hands, tearing it open with fingers that trembled with rage rather than grief. I wished I could have watched him read my explanation, the careful recounting of his own words, the documentation of his behavior, the clinical analysis of how he'd forfeited his inheritance through his treatment of me during my final months. "This is insane," Daniel said when he finished reading. "She was sick, medicated, not thinking clearly. No rational person leaves £2.5 million to their housekeeper while giving their own son nothing." "Actually," Michael said quietly, "your mother gave you exactly what you earned through your behavior toward her during her illness." My behavior was fine. I visited regularly. I called constantly. I tried to help her manage her affairs. You visited to monitor her condition. You called to pressure her about legal documents. You tried to manage affairs that weren't your responsibility. Daniel stood up abruptly, pacing to the window with the barely controlled energy of someone fighting not to explode. "This is about the investment advisor, isn't it? She was angry that I contacted Blackwood about portfolio management. Daniel, this is about 8 months of treating your dying mother like an inconvenience, delaying your access to her money." "That's not what I did." Michael pulled out a file folder I'd asked him to prepare, documentation of every conversation Daniel had initiated about finances, every pressure he'd applied regarding legal documents, every instance where he'd treated my medical condition as a timeline issue rather than a human tragedy. "Your mother documented everything, Daniel. Every conversation, every pressure tactic, every moment when you prioritized your inheritance over her dignity. Daniel stared at the evidence of his own behavior with the expression of someone seeing himself clearly for the first time. I loved her, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Did you? Michael asked. Or did you love what she represented to your financial future? Anna finally spoke, her voice thick with tears. Mr. Hartwell, I can't accept this inheritance. It's not right. Daniel is her son, regardless of whatever happened between them. Anna, Michael said gently, Rose spent months making this decision. She chose you because she believed you'd earned this responsibility through years of treating her with genuine care and respect. But the amount, I don't know how to handle this kind of money. You'll learn. Rose believed you would, and she provided resources to help you manage it wisely. Daniel turned from the window, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. This is theft. Legal theft. I'll contest this will. No court in the country will uphold a decision to leave millions to a housekeeper while disinheriting the only child. Actually, Michael said, consulting another document, any attempt to contest the will results in the immediate termination of your monthly allowance. What monthly allowance? £800 per month, contingent on your acceptance of your mother's decisions and your civilized treatment of Anna. £800. Less than Daniel typically spent on a single dinner out, but probably more than he'd have access to once his inheritance expectations proved false. £800. Daniel's voice cracked. She left me £800 a month? She left you enough to survive modestly while you learned to support yourself through your own efforts. Daniel stared at Michael as if he'd spoken a foreign language. Support myself? I'm a lawyer. Then practice law. Earn money through work rather than inheritance. You don't understand. I have obligations, expenses, a lifestyle to maintain. You have the same obligations everyone else has, to support yourself through your own efforts. Daniel turned to Anna with desperation in his eyes. You can't accept this money. It's not yours. You didn't earn it. Anna looked at him through her tears. Daniel, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry this happened. But your mother, she made this choice for reasons I'm only beginning to understand. What reasons? What possible reasons could justify this? Anna folded my letter carefully and put it back in its envelope. She said you forgot that love is earned, not owed. That you forgot she was your mother, not your investment. That's not true, isn't it? Daniel, in all the months of her illness, did you ever ask how she was feeling about dying? Did you ever want to talk about her fears, her hopes, her memories? Did you ever treat her like a person instead of a source of money? Daniel opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. She said you had 34 years to earn her respect and affection. She said you chose to spend her final months calculating your inheritance instead. The fight seemed to go out of Daniel all at once. He sank back into his chair, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. What am I supposed to do now? You're supposed to learn, Michael said. You're supposed to discover what it means to earn money instead of expecting it. You're supposed to figure out how to build relationships based on love rather than financial benefit. And if I can't, then you'll spend the rest of your life understanding what you lost. After Daniel left, promising legal action he couldn't afford and making threats that only demonstrated how completely he'd missed the point. Anna remained in Michael's office, still stunned by the magnitude of what had happened to her life. Mr. Hartwell, I don't understand why Mrs. Tyler chose me. Because in 8 years of working for her, you never once treated her as anything less than a human being worthy of dignity. Because you cared for her during her illness, without expecting reward. Because you showed her genuine kindness when her own son saw only opportunity. What am I supposed to do with this responsibility? Michael smiled, the first genuine smile of the entire morning. Anna, Rose believed you'd figure that out. She believed you'd use this gift to build something beautiful for your daughters and for yourself. What if I make mistakes? You'll make mistakes. Everyone does. But Rose believed you'd make them from kindness rather than greed, from generosity rather. 6 months after my death, Anna Pemberton walked through my house, her house now, with the careful steps of someone still adjusting to a completely transformed life. She'd kept everything exactly as I'd left it during those first overwhelming weeks after the will reading. My furniture in the same positions, my books on the same shelves, my gardens maintained with the same loving attention she'd always shown them. The only changes had been practical ones. Converting my bedroom into a sitting room she actually used, updating the kitchen with appliances that made daily life easier, installing a security system that protected the valuable art I'd collected over the years. The house felt lived in rather than preserved, which would have pleased me enormously. Anna had followed my advice about waiting before making major decisions, using those months to educate herself about managing significant wealth. She'd met with financial advisors, learned about investment strategies, and most importantly, thought carefully about what she wanted to do with the responsibility I'd given her. Her daughters had adapted to their changed circumstances with the resilience of youth. Lucy was thriving at art college in London, her tuition paid from the education trust I'd established, her talent flourishing in an environment where financial anxiety couldn't constrain her creativity. Sophie had spent the summer volunteering at a medical clinic in Ghana, her travel funded by the same trust, her future in medicine secured by the knowledge that she'd never have to choose between her dreams and financial reality. But the most significant change in Anna's life wasn't material. It was the confidence that came from understanding she'd earned her good fortune through character rather than luck. Daniel, meanwhile, had spent those same 6 months learning what it meant to live within his means for the first time in his adult life. The monthly allowance I'd provided barely covered rent on a modest apartment in a part of London he'd previously considered beneath his notice. His expensive suits looked increasingly out of place as he took on work that actually paid wages rather than simply managing inherited wealth. He'd attempted to contest the will, exactly as I'd predicted. The lawyer he'd consulted had reviewed the documentation Michael provided and advised him that pursuing legal action would be both expensive and futile. My mental confidence at the time of the will's creation was thoroughly documented. My reasons for disinheritance were clearly stated, and the trust structure I'd created was legally unassailable. More importantly, any contest would terminate the modest monthly income that was keeping him housed and fed. Daniel had also attempted to contact Anna directly, hoping to negotiate some private arrangement that would give him access to what he still considered his rightful inheritance. Anna had handled these conversations with a grace I admired, explaining that she considered herself a steward of my legacy rather than its owner, and that she intended to honor my wishes completely. Daniel, she told him during their final phone conversation, your mother didn't leave me this money to share with you. She left it to me because she trusted my judgment about how to use it properly. Part of that judgment involves respecting her decision to exclude you. But surely you understand that she was acting emotionally, not rationally. I understand that she was acting from a place of deep disappointment about how her own son treated her during the most vulnerable time of her life. Anna, please. I'm family. You're also the person who told his dying mother that the cancer would get her soon enough, so she might as well hand over her money immediately. I don't consider that family behavior. Anna had hung up after that conversation, and Daniel hadn't called again. But the most satisfying development had come in the form of a letter Anna received on the 6-month anniversary of my death. It was from Daniel, written on cheap paper with a ballpoint pen rather than the expensive stationery he'd once favored. Anna, I'm writing to apologize for the way I treated you after Mom died. You didn't deserve my anger or my attempts to pressure you into sharing money that was legally and morally yours. I've spent the past 6 months learning things I should have learned decades ago. How to work for money instead of expecting it, how to live within my means instead of constantly expanding them, how to find worth in effort rather than inheritance. I'm working as a junior solicitor now, earning less in a month than I used to spend on wine. I live in a bedsit in Croydon and take the tube to work every day. 6 months ago, I would have considered this life a failure. Now I'm beginning to understand it might be the first honest work I've ever done. I also understand why Mum made the choice she made. I spent 34 years treating her love as automatic and her money as inevitable. During her final months, when she needed her son most, I gave her a financial advisor instead. You gave her dignity, respect, and genuine care without expecting reward. I gave her pressure, calculation, and impatience disguised as concern. She rewarded the person who earned her gratitude and withheld inheritance from the person who took her love for granted. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't want money. I wanted you to know that I finally understand the difference between loving someone and using someone. I understand why she trusted you with her legacy and why she couldn't trust me with it. I hope you use Mum's gift well. I hope Lucy and Sophie grow up understanding that their opportunities came from their mother's character, not from random good fortune. I hope you find ways to help other people the way Mum helped her family. And I hope that someday, if I learn to be the man she wanted me to be, you might consider having a conversation that isn't about money or inheritance or legal obligations. Just two people who both loved her, remembering who she was when she was at her best. Daniel. Anna had shared this letter with Michael Hartwell, who'd smiled as he read it. It appears your mother's final lesson may have been more effective than she hoped, he'd said. Do you think he really means it?
Anna had asked.
Or is this just another strategy? I think, Michael had replied, that it takes real humility to admit you've spent 34 years being the wrong person. Whether he sustains this insight or reverts to his old patterns remains to be seen. But this letter suggests he's at least capable of genuine self-reflection. Anna had written back, a brief note acknowledging Daniel's apology and expressing hope that he'd continue growing into the man his mother had wanted him to become. She hadn't offered reconciliation, but she hadn't closed the door to future possibilities either, which was exactly the balance I would have chosen myself. On the first anniversary of my death, Anna did something that would have made me prouder than any monument or memorial service. She established a fund to provide support for single mothers pursuing education or training that would allow them to better support their families. The fund paid for childcare, tuition, books, and living expenses, all the barriers that made it nearly impossible for women in Anna's former situation to improve their circumstances. She called it the Rose Tyler Second Chances Fund, and she administered it from the conservatory where Daniel had first revealed his true nature to me over Sunday lunch. The first recipient was a 32-year-old woman named Maria Santos, who'd been cleaning offices at night while studying nursing during the day, trying to build a better life for her 3 children. The fund allowed her to quit the cleaning job and focus entirely on her studies, graduating with honors and immediately finding work at a hospital where she could use her skills to help others. Maria sent Anna a photo from her graduation, wearing the same expression of overwhelming gratitude that Anna herself had worn when she learned about her inheritance. The cycle of earned generosity continuing, creating ripples of opportunity that would spread far beyond what I could have imagined when I first decided to redirect my legacy. Daniel, meanwhile, had continued his evolution from entitled heir to self-supporting adult. He'd been promoted to senior solicitor at his firm, handling mostly family law cases where he'd apparently developed a reputation for helping clients navigate inheritance disputes with unusual wisdom and fairness. According to Anna, who'd heard this through mutual acquaintances, Daniel had become an advocate for clients dealing with family members who saw them primarily as sources of money. He'd learned to recognize the signs of financial manipulation and emotional exploitation, probably because he'd once been expert in both. His transformation, if genuine, represented the most expensive education anyone could receive, but also potentially the most valuable. On the second anniversary of my death, Anna made a pilgrimage to my grave in the village churchyard. She brought fresh flowers from the gardens she still tended with the same care she'd shown when I was alive, and she sat beside my headstone for an hour, updating me on her daughter's progress, her own adjustment to wealth, and the growing impact of the fund she'd created in my memory. "Mrs. Tyler," she said to the granite stone that marked my resting place, "I hope you're pleased with what we've done with your gift. Lucy's artwork is being exhibited in a London gallery next month. Sophie starts medical school in September. The fund has helped 47 women so far, and every one of them reminds me of who I used to be." She paused, pulling weeds from around the base of my headstone with the same attention to detail she'd always brought to my gardens. "Daniel sent me a Christmas card last year. Just a card, nothing else. But he wrote a note inside saying he's engaged to a social worker named Sarah, someone who knew nothing about his family money when they met because he doesn't have any family money to know about. He said they're planning a small wedding they're paying for themselves, and he wanted me to know he's finally learning the difference between loving someone and needing them for financial security." Anna smiled at the memory. "I think you'd be proud of him. It only took losing everything to teach him how to earn something." As the sun set over the village where I'd lived and died and been buried, Anna gathered her things and prepared to return to the house that had become her family's home. "Thank you," she said to my grave, "for trusting me with this responsibility, for showing me that kindness has value, for teaching me that some gifts are meant to be shared rather than hoarded." She walked away through the gathering dusk, leaving behind flowers that would bloom until the first frost ended their season, just like the generosity I'd planted in her life, designed to create beauty long after I was gone. Some legacies are measured in money. Some legacies are measured in lives changed through earned generosity. Some legacies are measured in lessons learned, even when those lessons come at the cost of everything the student thought they wanted. I'd left all three types of legacy behind me. But the greatest inheritance of all was the knowledge that Anna would continue the cycle, using wealth to create opportunity, using opportunity to build character, using character to determine who deserved the next generation's trust. Daniel had learned that inheritance must be earned. Anna had learned that earning inheritance creates the obligation to help others earn theirs. And somewhere in London, Lucy was creating art that celebrated beauty, while Sophie was preparing to heal the sick, both of them carrying forward the understanding that privilege comes with responsibility. My death had not been an ending. It had been a beginning. Some women are remembered for the fortunes they accumulated. I would be remembered for the wisdom with which I gave mine away. Rose's story proves that true power isn't about how much money you have. It's about how wisely you use it to create the world you want to see. If her journey resonates with you, if you've ever felt taken for granted by family or underestimated because of your circumstances, then you need our book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain. This transformative guide has already helped thousands of women recognize their own worth, set boundaries that protect their dignity, and make choices that honor their values rather than other people's expectations. Whether you're dealing with selfish family members, learning to say no to people who see you as an opportunity, or simply trying to rebuild your confidence after being taken advantage of, this book will show you practical steps to reclaim your power and create the respect you deserve. Don't let anyone convince you that putting yourself first is selfish. Rose proved that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to reward bad behavior. Click the link in the description to order your copy today and start writing your own story of dignity and triumph. What did you think of Rose's ultimate revenge? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, you're never too old to change the rules, and it's never too late to demand the treatment you deserve. Subscribe for more stories of women who proved that the best revenge is a life well lived and legacy well planned.